All right, good afternoon. Today in Berlin, in Germany, the Secretary General called on member states, companies, technology experts, and civil society to join forces and explore the possibility of a global commitment on digital trust and security. Speaking alongside German Chancellor Angela Merkel at the opening of the Internet Governance Forum, the Secretary General also announced that he will soon appoint a technology envoy to help advance international frameworks and nurture a shared digital future that puts people first and helps bridge the social divide. Immediately after the event, the Secretary General had a bilateral meeting with Angela Merkel. In remarks to the press, he said that digital technology is shaping history and reiterates that we have a collective responsibility to maximize its benefits while managing risk and avoiding unintended consequences. He also said that we need smart regulatory frameworks and that he was pleased that Europe is leading the way. Turning to the climate crisis, the Secretary General mentioned the two reports published this week that bring more evidence that we are currently not winning the race for our lives against the climate crisis. Throughout the day, the Secretary General met with several other German officials, including the President and Minister of Defense and Minister of Foreign Affairs. And as you saw last night, the Secretary General said he had hosted an informal dinner with the leader of the Greek Cypriot community and the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community. That statement was issued to you yesterday. And as mentioned on the climate reports, ahead of the start of the next UN climate change conference in Madrid, a new report by the UN Environment Programme warns that global emissions must be slashed by 7.6% every year for the next decade to meet the Paris Agreement target of 1.5 degrees temperature rise. With the current unconditional commitments made under the Paris Agreement, this year's annual emissions gap report cautions that global temperatures are expected to rise by 3.2 degrees centigrade. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has cautioned that going beyond 1.5 degrees will increase the frequency and intensity of climate impacts. The Secretary General stressed that there's never been a more important time to listen to the science, adding that failing to heed these warnings and take drastic action to reverse emissions means we will continue to witness deadly, catastrophic heat waves, storms, and pollutions. In a tweet, he underscored that we need more ambitious climate action from every country, city, business, and individual to protect our future. The full report is online. And after the Secretary, just on the Congo, to let you know, the Secretary General Special Representative for the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Leila Zerugi, will brief the Security Council via VTC in close consultations regarding the situation in Beni, in the country's east. We've arranged for her to speak to you at 2 p.m. Via video conference in this room. Also on the DRC, the World Health Organization said that although recent violence in Beni was not directed against the Ebola response team, WHO has decided to relocate 49 of its 120 staff from Beni to Goma. WHO had previously been able to trace more than 90% of the contacts, but now that figure stands only at 17%. 7 new cases have been reported in the past week. Overall, as of November 24th, there's been 3,303 cases, of which 2,199 had resulted in death of the patient, 1,077 have survived, while others are still receiving treatment. And turning to Yemen, the head of the UN mission to support the Hudaydah Agreement, Lieutenant General Guha, is deeply concerned about the escalation of violence witnessed in the last few days in Yemen's Hudaydah Governorate and its surroundings. The increase in number of airstrikes undertaken in the last 72 hours is in stark contrast to the relative calm after the establishment of the observation posts. The Lieutenant General is alarmed by the reported loss of life and the suffering among the Yemeni people caused by such attacks, noting that they jeopardize the safety of members and Redeployment Coordination Committee, the body responsible for monitoring the ceasefire. He urges all parties to refrain from any action that may be in contravention to the terms and the spirit of the Stockholm Agreement and avoid further escalation of the situation. He further urges the use of the de-escalation mechanism established with the support of the UN mission to resolve differences and support ongoing efforts to maintain the ceasefire in Hudaydah. As part of her continued efforts in the search for political solution for Iraq's crisis, the Secretary General Special Representative for Iraq, Janine Hennish-Plasschaert, has held separate meetings with the President of Iraq, the Prime Minister, and the Speaker of the Council of Representatives. She stressed the need to reflect the people's legitimate call for electoral reforms and the legislation that is currently under review by the Council of Representatives. The Special Representative also recently visited 2 hospitals in Baghdad, where she met with some of the people who have been injured during the demonstrations and also spoke with some of the healthcare workers. Back here in the Council, Karim Assad Ahmad Khan, the Special Advisor and head of the UN investigative team to promote accountability for crimes committed by Daesh, briefed the Security Council this morning. Mr. Khan told Council members that the investigative team has continued to ensure that the experiences and the needs of the survivors of Daesh crimes and the families of its victims are placed at the center of its work. And he said that 1 year following the arrival in Iraq, the team is now fully operational. And the head of the UN mission in Mali, the Special Representative Mohamed Saleh Anadif, paid tribute this morning to the 13 French soldiers of Operation Barkhane who were killed in an accident between 2 helicopters during a fight against jihadists in Mali. Mr. Anadif said the French Operation Barkhane is dedicated tirelessly to keep people of Mali and the Sahel safe from terror. He said he bowed to the memory of the fallen soldiers. And just to flag that Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Ursula Mueller, is starting off a 2-day visit to Morocco, where she will deliver a keynote address in Rabat at the International Humanitarian Law event on the 70th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions. That event is being co-hosted by the Kingdom of Morocco and the International Committee of the Red Cross. In Morocco, she will also meet with government officials to discuss multilateral humanitarian system and Morocco's further contributions to it. And just an update from OCHA, from Djibouti, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that heavy rains and floods have impacted more than 150,000 people, with 9 people, including 7 children, reportedly having been killed in the city of Djibouti. In support of the government-led efforts, the UN and our partners have launched an emergency needs assessment and are deploying emergency health kits, drinking water, and mosquito nets. Additional funds are needed to scale up the response. And in Kenya, more than 160,000 people have been impacted by heavy rainfall since early October, with more than 100 reportedly killed and thousands displaced due to floods and landslides. The UN offers its condolences to the families of the victims and stands ready to help the government and people of Kenya. And following earthquakes that struck this morning Albania and Bosnia-Herzegovina, I want just to let you know that 2 UN Disaster Assessment Coordination technical support members will be deployed to Albania, and the UN stands ready to provide any further assistance to Bosnia-Herzegovina if required. And the UN is in contact with local authorities for more information on the situation as well. And just yesterday, you saw we issued a statement on Bolivia, welcoming the positive developments over the weekend towards a peaceful and democratic solution to the crisis in the country. Just a few more notes. In a few minutes, I will be joined by Ninan Varugese, the director ad interim of the UNAIDS office here in New York. He will brief you on the new UNAIDS report entitled Power to the People that's being released ahead of World AIDS Day. Also ahead of World AIDS Day, UNICEF says that some 320 million children and adolescents died every day. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. UNICEF estimates that some 320 children and adolescents died every day from AIDS-related causes in 2018. That's according to the Global Snapshot on Children, HIV, and AIDS, released by UNICEF. Any of you know what humanium is? No, I didn't know until I was given this note. Humanium. Humanium metal transforms illicit firearms in regions affected by armed violence into non-lethal commodities for peace and reinvests income into communities affected by gun violence. To date, 4 p.m., the Office of Disarmament Affairs, the Permanent Missions of Sweden and El Salvador, and the UN, as well as the NGO IM, a Swedish development partner, will host an inaugural ceremony to welcome the addition of a Humanium medal display in the UN Permanent Disarmament exhibition. The display will include a watch, an ingot, and a bracelet made from Humanium metal. The events will take place in the exhibit area in the delegates' entrance, otherwise known as the Kuwaiti boat area. Finally, tomorrow we will be joined by Reem Abaza, the spokeswoman for the President of the General Assembly. And as a reminder that Thursday we are closed. You are not welcome in this building. None of us are. And Friday we will be open, but we will not be briefing, but we will be available to answer questions should you have any. And maybe you want to ask one today.
Yes. I have a question on Humanium exhibitions at the United Nations. I thought exhibitions were not allowed based on the austerity list that you sent us?
No, outside of working hours. This is within working hours.
I'll have to check.
Okay.
No new exhibits, that's what I heard.
Okay. That was your only question?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, Joe.
Yes. In the Secretary General's remarks or meetings relating to the Internet governance, to what extent did he bring into the discussion his statements in the past on hate speech and social media, and also did he strongly advocate for non-censorship on the Internet? As we know, some countries like Iran have closed the Internet and so forth.
Have you read his remarks? Okay, well, I would refer you to his remarks because I think they're fairly extensive on all of the issues that you raised. And he delivered them about 2 hours ago. James.
I have two China-related questions. First one, with regard to Hong Kong, we have your consistent position of restraint with regard to the protests. I don't want to ask you about the protests. I want you to ask you what the UN's position is on the actual demands of these people, because it's clear that the demands are very representative of the people of Hong Kong as displayed in the recent elections. So what does the UN make of these demands, and what is its message to Beijing about listening to these demands?
And your second question?
Well, it's a different part of China. But
well, go ahead.
Secretary of State Pompeo has said in the last hour that he believes the estimates of 1 million people being detained, Uyghurs being detained in Chinese detention camps. Does the UN share that view, that that figure is accurate, and does the Secretary General have anything more to say about those people and the way they're being treated?
On China, this is our position remains what it has, which is that the issues need to be dealt with through dialogue. I mean, that has not changed.
Yeah, but you have in the past talked, certainly the Chinese authorities have talked about activists, protesters. It's clear this is much more representative as a result of the election now. Does that change the way that the Secretary General approaches
Listen,
this?
there were elections, by all accounts, held freely, and I really have nothing to add to what we've said earlier. And your other question,
Uyghur numbers and your view on their ongoing detention.
No, I don't have any. I don't have any access to any numbers. I mean, we've talked a lot about the situation in Xinjiang. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, as you're aware, is continuing active discussions with authorities to have in order to be able to visit China. We hope those engagements continue and lead to a positive outcome. For his part, the Secretary General, and I think he made some comments to some of your colleagues in Germany earlier today, has consistently stressed the need for all countries to follow applicable human rights law. And he's also spoken in more detail on the situation in Xinjiang. And I mean, I could reread what we've read.
But again, it's always couched in all countries. This is a very specific
I know,
issue.
and
There's one country that is holding potentially 1 million people in detention.
The Secretary General has raised this issue with the Chinese authority, the situation in Jiang. He's raised it when he was in China. He raised it, as I said, when he met with the Prime Minister on the sidelines in ASEAN. And his position, I mean, so he has, this issue is not one that he has ignored. It's one that he has raised both publicly and privately. Yes, and then Edie.
Thank you, Stéphane. Today, because of the meeting of ISIS accountability, I wanted to ask you about this. As you know, the work of the team is to gather evidence mainly, but the biggest question is not addressed yet: what to do with these foreign ISIS fighters? That some of them, this evidence shows that they are committed these crimes. Should there be a multilateral solution for this? Should they just be returned to their countries, mostly in Europe? I wanted to know, what is the Secretary General's position about this? Does he think there should be a multilateral solution for the issue of foreign terrorist fighters in Syria and in Iraq?
Look, I think what the Secretary General said publicly not too long ago is there needs to be better cooperation, global cooperation on this issue. There needs to be accountability. There also needs to be respect for human rights, in the sense of anyone who's accused is also has certain rights. I think, as Mr. Khan said in his remarks, they have been cooperating with Iraq. They've also been cooperating with a number of other countries in order to help them prosecute these horrendous crimes. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. Does the Secretary General have any reaction to the new report by the UN Environment Program saying that countries need to begin making steep cuts in their greenhouse gas emissions, otherwise risking global warming that's going to go well beyond?
I mean, as if we needed more reminders, right? The science is clear. It's clear every day. There was a report yesterday by the World Meteorological Organization, today by the UN Environment Program. Failing to listen to the science will have dire consequences. Drastic action needs to be taken, and we need to see drastic action, and we need to see renewed political commitment. Carla, and then Joe.
Thank you. On that note, I may have missed in the past couple of months, but has the Secretary General said anything about the Brazilian President Bolsonaro's authorizing the cutting down of so much of the Amazon? I mean, since there's a tremendous push for climate change, the Brazilian president seems to be totally, clueless. And the only thing I've seen is him insulting President Macron's wife.
I mean, I think at the time this issue raised, the Secretary General spoke to it when he was in Biarritz during the G7. It is clear that all those countries who are the keepers of these massive forests, whether they be in the Amazon, whether they be in Asia or in Africa, have a shared responsibility to keep these environments alive. Joe.
Bolsonaro isn't changing, so is any follow-up at all?
I think this will be an issue that will also, I'm sure, be discussed at the COP. Yes.
Yes, I now had a chance to review fairly rapidly, I must admit, the Secretary General's remarks.
I thought you weren't paying attention to what I was saying?
All
right, fine.
Well, you didn't say, you just told me to read it.
It's all right, Joe.
And I always follow your direction. Having gone over it, and I did see his references to the potential abuses of social media, reflecting what he said before. I didn't see anything calling out any specific instances of censorship or shutting down the internet, let alone calling out any particular countries like Iran China and other
I think
closed
we
societies.
have spoken out.
But this was an opportunity. This was an opportunity for him, at that forum on internet governance, to specifically call out the repressive societies like Iran that have recently shut down, let alone censored, they've shut down the internet. Why didn't he take this opportunity to address it?
We addressed the issue of the shutdown that took place in Iran last week during demonstrations from here, the Human Rights High Commissioner as well. The Internet Governance Forum is a very useful forum for the Secretary General, for all stakeholders to get together, to discuss the future of the Internet. For the Secretary General's part, it's about ensuring that all the positive benefits of the Internet are not negatively impacted by all the negative sides of what we've seen, the hate speech, the human trafficking, all of that. It's about getting all the stakeholders together to create policies, to create guidelines, and to ensure that we remain to have one internet, that we're not seeing. I mean, the Secretary General speaks about the risk of fracture of different internets, which is not what he wants to see.
Shouldn't the cardinal principle be no censorship on the internet? It should be an open
I think the Secretary General has been very clear on the need for freedom of speech in whatever form. Next, that would be you, my friend.